This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so how many of you installed the yesterday session? I hope all of you installed the SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
So what we are trying to do in the last session, we were installing the SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio. Anybody facing any issues while installing these two? If you are facing any issues at the end of the session, please let me know. I will give you the presenter of your screen and you can share your screen and I will look on that issue. We can resolve the issue. Okay. So whatever the SQL Server I installed yesterday and whatever the SQL Server Management Studio I installed yesterday, I'm going to verify how to connect by using the SQL Server Management Studio, using SQL Server Management Studio into the SQL Server. So simply go to SQL Server Management Studio 18. This is the one I have installed. The SQL Server Management Studio, simply we are calling it as a SSMS. SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. And this SSMS, generally, it's a development tool. By using this tool only, we are connecting to SQL Server and writing SQL queries. Just try to open it. Server softwares are different and tool softwares are different. Mostly the tools we are using to connect to the server and doing some development. Server is something, a process in the background it is running. All right. So you need to connect to your server. What is your server name? The server names, there are many number of servers I have installed. The SQL Server I installed many number of times. We can see under database engine, total how many number of times you have installed the SQL Server is. So this is desktop, KTD3BKJ, lift and shift. So a computer name slash instance name. That is the combination of server name. A server name is nothing but a computer name slash instance name. What is the meaning of instance name? The meaning of instance name is at the time of installing the SQL Server, you are providing some server name. You are providing some instance name, installation name. So that is called instance name. So what we are doing, I have installed the SQL Server on my computer these many number of times. Okay. So yesterday we installed desktop KTD3BKJ slash E classes batch 123. This is the SQL Server I have installed. Desktop KTD3BKJ is my computer name slash E classes batch 123 is my instance name. So I'm going to connect to that particular server and what are the different ways you are going to authenticate? Means it needs to verify whether you have access to the server or not based on this authentication. Okay, that is the Windows authentication and SQL authentication. Windows authentication means by default it will take your computer user login name and password. Every computer Windows having a username and password. So my computer username is to log into this computer desktop KTD3BKJ slash Lenovo. That is my username and password by default it will take, you don't need to enter anything. Because this account, the desktop Lenovo is a administrator of this computer. So if it is an administrator of this computer, inside this computer any kind of services running, all those services by default will get the access to this Windows user. Okay, for this Windows user, he will get by default access to all the services. That's called a Windows authentication. So this Windows username will get automatically access to this particular server. You don't need to enter any information. Just click over here and just click on the SQL Server authentication. SQL Server authentication means the username SA and password is yesterday we entered some password. So this username password can help us to find anyone can connect to this particular server from anywhere if they have this username and password. Let's say for example, I have installed a SQL Server on my local machine and you can able to connect by using this SQL Server Management Studio in your machine either through SQL authentication or Windows authentication. For example, I want to connect to the SQL Server installed on my other computer to from the another computer. This is another computer and in this computer I installed only SQL Server Management Studio and this is a SQL Server I installed in another computer and this is SQL Server Management Studio. So what I'm trying to do over here, I'm trying to connect to this SQL Server from the same computer using the SQL Server Management Studio. So you can use Windows authentication because the server is on your machine. That Windows username password get the access and you will connect. But if I am connecting to this particular server through the Management Studio installed in a different computer, okay, the Windows authentication will not work because the Windows username of this computer is different. That Windows username password may not have access to this computer. So in that kind of situation, you can use SQL authentication. If you have a SQL authentication username password, anyone from any computer can able to connect. Generally, in the real-time situations, what will happen in your organization, they will install a SQL server somewhere in a computer that is nothing but a server. They are keeping installing SQL server in a particular computer. They install SQL server in this computer. So in my organization, there are 10 people are working in a project. So what they will do, each person, they are going to install SQL Management Studio in their computer. See here, this is SQL Management Studio. This is SQL Management Studio. Alright, and they will connect to this server by using SQL authentication. And they will develop whatever they want to. The authentication modes what they are using, everyone is SQL authentication. So this is the process we will follow in the real-time situation when we are trying to connect to the SQL server installed in a computer. These 4 people are in my project. They have their own laptops. They will install only SQL Management Studio. They don't install SQL Server in their computer. SQL Server is already installed on some other computer. So they will try to connect to that. So how to do that one? So you need to provide the server name. All the 4 people provide the server name in the Management Studio and they will enter this username and password. Then try to connect here. So now they are able to connect to the server over here. See this left side, you are getting an Object Explorer and this Object Explorer is going to give you the detailed information about your, if you have any databases and what is your server name and all those things. So if you observe, there are many objects available over here. The security server, object replication, polybase management, these are DB activities, means database administrative activities. But we are going to learn in this course as a developer, development activities. Development activities in the sense, writing the SQL queries and querying the data in required format. These kind of activities we are going to take care over here. So our primary focus in this course is learning the SQL, because for example, you have a database. Inside the database you have a tables. Inside the tables you have a data. If you want to see the data in your, as per your requirement, business requirement, you are going to ask a question. I need 10 employee salaries. That you need to write down in SQL language. So to store the data in your business, if you see the architecture what we are following last time, any business need a backend database. So the backend database, whatever we have, that database we are going to use, to store the data. So first we need to create a database. Do we have already any existing database? So under the databases, you can see there are some system databases. System databases means there are 4 databases available for the system. What is the purpose of the system databases? The purpose of each system database is based on system information. It will use each database to store some information. There are some system databases. Master database, MSDB database, and temp database, and model database. These are the 4 databases available: master, MSDB, TempDB, model database. What the master database will do? You are trying to sign in over here, right? You are trying to share this database, master database. The master database, whatever, contains all the logins information and access information. When I'm trying to connect to this particular server, I entered username, passwords. I entered the usernames and passwords. The username, password, whatever you entered is correct or not, and this username, password having access to this particular server or not, that it will verify in the master database. It will verify that in the master database, because the master database contains all the information, all logins information. By mistake, if you are deleting this master database, you will lose everything. You cannot able to log into this computer because it will try to authenticate in the master database, but there is no master database, so you cannot authenticate. Okay, the master database logins, access information existing inside. So coming to the MSDB database, what this MSDB database will contain? In SQL Server, there is a SQL Server agent. We are using that for scheduling of some activities. We are going to create a jobs to be scheduled to run the queries and some SSIS related tasks as per schedule. Daily I want to execute a particular task, and that kind of scheduled information and the jobs information will be saved your SQL Server inside this database. Because SQL, whatever the actions you want you to do by the SQL Server needs to save that information somewhere. So that is the reason it is saving that information inside the MSDB. Master database is for storing all the logins access information existing inside. And the MSDB database is jobs to schedule to run the queries and SSIS tasks as per the schedule. Okay. And what about this temp database? Sometimes we are creating a tables just for temporary purpose. It needs a database to store some of the objects. The objects might be anything like a tables. To store some of the objects temporarily, it needs one database, that is temp database. Your SQL Server will store temporarily some objects inside. And coming to the model database, a model database is something, for example, I want to create my own user database, like organizing as a employee database, employee DB. So this employee database, whatever we are going to create, this is we are calling as a user defined database. User defined DB. And above all these databases are the master databases. This is user defined database because I am going to create to store my own data. All these databases are used by SQL Server to store its own data. So when you are creating any user defined database, that user defined database is going to create, at the time of creating this database, it is just taking a copy of model database, that's all. The SQL Server, what it will do, whenever the user is creating a new database, it is just taking a copy of the existing model database. The model database is a structure contains some of the objects. The same structure will be copied into the employee DB as sample database. Okay. The user defined database, whenever you are creating, it is considering this model database. It is considering the model database. All right. For example, inside the model database, I'm going to create 100 tables. If I'm creating a new database, employee DB, automatically 100 tables will be created in the employee database also. Okay. So a model database is a copy or the replication to user defined databases. By considering this model database only, user defined database will be created. Okay. All right. So now what I want to do, I want to create my own database. I don't want to use the system databases to store the data. Before I'm going to understand and how to create a database, I want to know this SQL Server, whatever the SQL Server you are using currently, what is the version edition of the software, and also the server name also. In that kind of situations, you need to write down a simple two queries, where you can write down the queries is, and the top you can see there is a two query option. So here you can write down select @ version. So if you are writing this query, select @ of version and click execute on the top. It is giving the full detailed information about your software. This is a Microsoft SQL Server 2017 version, and it is an Enterprise Evolutionary Edition 64-bit on Windows 10. This is what the information it is giving. So you can able to understand what is the SQL Server software you are using while you are developing. Please note down this one. Select @ of version will give you the information about your SQL Server. Okay, what is the server name here you connected? Because you installed many number of times your SQL Server. If you want to understand the server name, then you can use select @ of server name. This is your server name you connected, if you remember. This is your computer name and your instance name. So @ of the version will give you the your SQL Server software information, version edition. @ server name will give you the what is your SQL Server. All right. Apart from these two, what I want to do now, I want to create my own database. A database is a collection of tables. A table having a columns and rows. One database contains many number of tables, and each table contains number of columns and rows. So how to create a database? There are two ways we can create a database. One is by right clicking on the databases, there is an option create a new database. Click on new database and give the database name here. For example, if I'm going to give this database name as employee DB, employee DB. When you are creating any database, there are two files will be created in the background. Those two files are going to save in your computer in this path. This is the location. One is a primary file, contains the data what you are going to insert. The second one is a log file. Log file is basically whatever you are trying to delete, the operations what you are doing in this database. It will store that log information, the activities log information. So the log file is not an important thing, but this primary file, whatever the data, actual data is going to store is very important. So this is way you can create a database by using a graphical user interface. Then click OK. The database administrators will create the databases. We don't take this ownership of creating a database. The database administrators will create. Alright, so a database is created. So without using this graphical user interface, right click and creating, Can we create a database by writing a SQL command? In SQL, if you want to write down any kind of SQL queries out of 8 commands, any of one command definitely you need to use. I'm going to categorize these 8 commands into two different categories. Two different categories we are going to categorize: DML and DDL commands. DML commands and DDL commands. DML commands covering under insert, update, delete, and select. These are the DML commands. And the DDL commands are create, drop, truncate, alter. These are the DML commands: insert, update, delete, select. Create, drop, alter, truncate is the another. So when you are going to write down a SQL commands, definitely you have to use any of this one command. If you are going to write down any SQL statements, definitely it should start with any of one command. So that is the reason if you are learning these 8 commands, then you are good in SQL. If you know these 8 commands, then you can manage somehow the SQL. If you learn the syntax for all these 8 commands, you completed the SQL training, not the DC. A normal SQL training is included only these 8 commands. So you should learn the syntax thoroughly for these 8 commands. Okay, what I want to do, I want to create a database by using a create command. So anything if you want to introduce newly, anything if you want to create newly, then you have to use this create command. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a database. So what is the syntax to create a new database by using a SQL? So you need to write down like this: create database. What is the database name? I'm going to give the database name as a employee DB. But already employee DB is created. I will give it as a different name. That is department database. So simply create this and execute this command. So it has created a command. Make sure, note down this point. Make sure when you are creating a new database by using a create database option, that needs to be selected this master database only. On the top, it should be selected the master database only in the drop down. Okay. In this here, definitely master database needs to be selected when you are creating a database in your computer in the SQL Server. Okay, so the database whatever you created, do you want to check whether it is created or not? Just try to refresh under the database. See, employee database I created by using a graphical user interface, like right click and create the database. And the department database is created by using a create database command. Okay, all right. So I created a database, but inside the database, let's say go to the employee database and go to the tables. I don't see any tables to store the data. I don't see any tables to store the data. Then what we need to do? We have to create a table as well. The table structure, what I'm going to create here, table name I will give it as a EMP table. First table name you need to define EMP, and inside this table what are the columns you want to keep. The columns what I'm going to keep over here is employee number, employee name, date of joining, and seller. So total 4 columns I'm going to keep inside this one. So there is an employee number, employee name, date of joining, and seller. So the employee number is 100, 200, 300, and Ram, Vihan, Shah. Date of joining is 2010 0101, 2011 0101, 2014 0101. Salary is per hourly basis $50.50, $40.65, and $30.78. Okay, so this is how I am creating a table. So this is the table. What happened? So employee number, employee name, date of joining, and salary. So these are the column names. Employee number, employee name, date of joining, salary is a column names. So employee number is one column, employee name is another column, date of joining another column, salary is another column. This is one row, and this is second row, this is third row. The vertical things are the columns, the horizontal things are the rows. So a table contains columns and rows, and EMP is a table name. I want to create the same kind of table with the same structure, and I want to store this data into this table inside the SQL Server. So how can we do that? So that we can do, just come down, and the same create statement you need to use. Create table. Earlier I have created a database. Now I am creating a table. What is the table name? EMP. You can give any name. What are all the columns you are going to define in this table? You need to open a bracket and close bracket. Employee number, employee name, of joining, and salary. So total 4 columns I am going to define over here. Employee number, employee name, date of joining, and salary. At the time you are creating the tables, you need to define on the table based on the nature of the data. What kind of data we are going to keep inside here? The data we are going to keep inside this employee number is a number data. 100, 200, 300, 400, something like that. This is a number data. So you need to define and you need to tell to the SQL Server, inside this column I will insert only a data type related to a number data type. At the time of creating the database table, you need to define the data type. So I'm going to define over here integer data type. So if you want to store any kind of number data type inside this table, that is called int data type. And the employee name is a kind of a string characters. There are three different kind of data types available. One is a char, another one is a varchar, another one is a varchar. These are the three different kind of data types available over here. And anything related to dates, we have a data type date data type. It's alone if you want to store only dates, or sometimes I want to store just timing like hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds. Then we have a time data type. If you want to combine the date and time both, so we have a data type date and time data. Date and time data. And this kind of decimal values, if you want to store, we have a data type decimal data type decimal, and also we have a float data type. Apart from these data types, we have some other data types also. But basically, we are using to store the numbers integer data type. For characters, strings, special characters, we are going to use either char, varchar, and varchar. Anything related to dates and timing, we are going to use date, time, date, and data types. And any kind of decimal values or floating values, we will use decimal or float value. Okay. So what we are going to define over here? First, on this employee number column, I'm going to define the data type is integer, means int. Whatever the employee name column. So employee name column, which kind of data type you want to take? Character, varchar, and varchar. So in your database, when you are inserting the data, each character, for example, employee name, RAM. How many characters? 3 characters. Each character will occupy 1 byte of the space. 1 character, 1 byte. At the time you are going to define this data type of this column, you need to specify the maximum number of characters you want to allow to insert for the employee name column. For example, I'm going to take a char data type. So you need to define char 10, employee name, character 10. What is the meaning of 10? Means inside this employee name column, if you are trying to insert data employee names, the employee name size means the number of characters should not be greater than 10. The employee name, the number of characters should not be greater than 10. You got my point? Now I am using RAM, just 3 characters, that's fine. If you are trying to use RAMANJANEYULU, it's more than 10 characters. But the limitation you are specifying on the employee name column is just 10 characters. Of course, if you want to increase, you can increase. Up to how many? Up to 8,000 characters you can specify. More than 8,000 characters you cannot insert into a single column value. So your employee name should be in 10 characters. Is it mandatory always it should be 10? Can I insert 3 characters only? Because the employee names all are not same. What will happen if I am inserting just 3 characters? Is it going to occupy 3 bytes only, or is it going to utilize the 10 bytes? When you are using the char data type, char of 10, but you are inserting 3 characters, even though it will wasting the remaining 7 characters. It will be wasting the remaining 7 characters as well. That's the reason I don't recommend the char data type. Char data type is a older data type, because unnecessarily it is wasting of the remaining 7 bytes when you are inserting just 3 bytes. So I will recommend varchar data type, because varchar data type contains a functionality. Even if you are specifying varchar 10, if you are inserting just 3 characters, if you are inserting just 3 characters, the rest of the 7 bytes of the space, it will use when you are inserting the next name RAM. I'm just inserting RAM. It is occupying 3 characters, means 3 bytes. The rest 7 bytes is going to utilize when you are going to insert this one. If you are using a char 10, total how many characters you are inserting in these 3 rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 14 only. Actually, it needs to occupy 14 bytes only. But when you are using char 10, 30 bytes of the space it will utilize. Because it is not releasing when there is a empty space. That is the reason I'm going to use varchar. Varchar is just using how many characters you are inserting. Just it will use 14 bytes only. Even if you are specifying the max limit as a 10 bytes. What is the difference between the char and the varchar is, char data type is a fixed length. Once you are fixing, then whether you are inserting those many characters or not, it will utilize. But varchar will not do. Varchar will varying the data size based on the volume of the data, number of bytes you are inserting into this particular column. Is it clear? Any question over here? Okay, perfect. So mostly we are using varchar data type. Then what is the difference between varchar and nvarchar? The nvarchar data type will support all the features whatever character and varchar data type we have. Okay, the nvarchar have a functionality similar like same for varchar. The advanced options what you have in nvarchar is, nvarchar will support some other different languages. You know Japanese language, And Japanese and Korean. So the Japanese and Korean languages, if you want to insert, I want to insert the employee names, Japanese names and Korean's names. In that kind of situations, you need to use definitely n-varchar data. Okay. And this Japanese and Korean language, each character will occupy 2 bytes, not the single byte, because those characters are very high weight. One character, Japanese character, will occupy 2 bytes of the space. But normal our English letters, characters will just occupy 1 byte only. So that is the difference between the varchar and nvarchar. Char data type is a fixed length, but varchar and nvarchar are not fixed length. Those are varying the size based on the data what inserting. Okay. And coming to this date of joining column. Date of joining column having 2 fields. One is a date. The data type is if you are taking as a date data type, in this column you can insert only the date, not the timing. If you want to store only timing, then you can use time data type. Or if you want to store a date along with the timestamp, then go ahead with the date time. Apart from this date time, I have one more data type, date time to data type. What is the difference between date time and date time to data type? You are inserting in this column by mentioning date time data type. When you are specifying the date time data type in this date of joining column, you can insert the dates only greater than 1700th year. If you want to insert any dates less than 1700th year, that is something like a 1400th year or 1300th year or 1200th year, then you have to use date time to only the data type. Also, if you observe the date time, the format of the date time will come like this. This data type is a date time data type. Year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds. But when you are coming to the date time 2, it will give you the more number of fraction of seconds over here. 7 digits, up to 7 digits it will give. That means more accurate. The difference between this date time data type and date time to data type is in the milliseconds part you will get up to 7 digits in the date time 2, but in the date time you will get 3 digits only. Also date time 2 will support the dates less than or equal to 1700 year also. It will support less than 1700 year along with the current years also. But date time will not support less than 1700 year. Alright. So this is all about today's session. Any questions so far? So someone is asking for abbreviation of the NVARCHAR. There is no special abbreviation for that, but the internal meaning is the NVARCHAR will support the Unicode kind of characters. Varchar supporting non-Unicode characters. What are the non-Unicode and Unicode is? Unicode characters will supported by NVARCHAR. Unicode characters means this Japanese and all these kind of languages. Okay, someone is created SQL Management Studio, but is not able to write down the new queries. Okay, is it Shivakumar? Can you please share your screen? If possible, I will make you the presenter. Yeah, share your screen, Shivakumar. We will look at our machine. So all of you who ever joined today's session, can you guys please ping me on WhatsApp? Just say hi. I'm trying to create a group for you. Simply go to the SQL Server, Management Studio. Wait, access is denied, exception. Okay. What you are trying to do? Just click OK. Just click OK. Yeah. And click on, yeah, click OK. And click on connect option here. The top you can see connect. Where exactly? Under the Object Explorer, connect database engine, the first one. Okay, you are able to connect this one. Yeah, click connect. Click connect. Right, you are able to connect. Yeah, now click on new query. Click on new query. Access denies. Yesterday, how did you create this employee database then, if you're not able to write down the SQL queries? Okay, we will talk this about offline. Okay guys, we will meet tomorrow and we'll continue the session. Please ping everyone whoever joined today's session on my WhatsApp number. You have my WhatsApp.
హలో రామ్.
Hi.
అంటే ఇప్పుడు మళ్ళీ అన్ఇన్స్టాల్ చేయాలా లేకుంటే ఇప్పుడు ఎలా ఇది?
We will discuss now.
ఓకే.